I am going to go over the urinary system in this video. Let's go to APR and connect. This is a view of the abdominal cavity. To get our orientation, this is the diaphragm, the liver, the spleen, the abdominal aorta, the inferior vena cava, and the suprarenal glands. Coming off of the abdominal aorta are the renal arteries. This is your left renal artery going to your left kidney. Draining into the inferior vena cava are the renal veins. This is the left one. The kidneys are bean-shaped organs. They sit between T12 and L3 and are retroperitoneal, meaning that they sit outside of the peritoneal cavity between the dorsal cavity wall and the parietal peritoneum. They have 3 layers surrounding them. The outermost layer is the renal fascia. It is connective tissue and it anchors the kidney and the adrenal gland to the surrounding structures. The middle layer is a perirenal fat capsule or pararenal fat. This capsule helps protect the kidney from mechanical trauma by providing some cushion. The innermost layer is the fibrous capsule, and it consists of connective tissue and prevents the spread of infection to the kidneys. Again, this is a view of the kidneys. Notice that there is a concave region here and here where the tubes are attached. The renal veins, the renal artery, the ureter. This is the hilum, that concave region where the tubes are connected. This is your ureter, the renal artery, and the renal veins. Internally, the kidney can be divided up into regions. The outer region is called the cortex. The middle region is the medulla. And the inner region is the renal sinus. Cortical material moving inward is called the renal column. So you can see all of these columns here. They are going to be between renal pyramids. Renal pyramids are located in the medulla. A renal pyramid with the associated cortex above it is called a lobe. At the tip of a renal pyramid is a renal papilla. The renal papilla drains into a tube called a minor calyx. And from there, the urine moves into the major calyx. The major calyx then will empty into the renal pelvis, which is continuous with the ureter. This is a sagittal view of a female. Just to get your orientation, that's the vagina. The uterus, this is your small intestine, your rectum, and your anal canal. That is your sacrum with the coccyx, and anteriorly, you'll notice the pubic symphysis. Looking at the urinary system, and these are the structures that you'll have to identify. You have the urinary bladder. Emptying the urinary bladder is the single urethra, and there is an external urethral sphincter that surrounds that urethra, and this is voluntary muscle, so it is skeletal muscle. This is a sagittal view of a male. There is the rectum, the anal canal. You can see the anal columns in the anal canal. You have your sacrum, your coccyx, and anteriorly your pubic symphysis. This is your penis, the scrotum with the testes. This is also your prostate gland right in here. Now let's look at the urinary system structures that are on your list. First of all, let's begin with the urinary bladder. Draining the urinary bladder, you will have the urethra. In the male, the urethra has distinct regions. The prostatic urethra is going through the prostate, this structure here, and that is a reproductive gland, into the membranous urethra, located here. And then once it enters the penis, it is called the spongy urethra or the penile urethra. You'll have an internal urethral orifice, which is going to be the opening between the urinary bladder and the prostatic urethra, and an external urethral orifice, which is going to be at the tip of the penis between the urethra and the outside. Anytime you see the term orifice, that is going to be an opening. You also have an internal urethral sphincter, the entrance into the prostatic urethra. We're going to learn that that sphincter will close during ejaculation to prevent any urine from getting into the urethra. And you also have an external urethral sphincter. Let's look at the histology of the kidney. The kidney consists of about 1.3 million nephrons. These are microscopic functional units responsible for making urine. They consist of a glomerulus and a renal tubule. The renal tubule begins at the Bowman's capsule into the proximal convoluted tubule, then the loop of Henle with both descending and ascending limbs, and the distal convoluted tubule. A renal corpuscle consists of the Bowman's capsule and a glomerulus. This is an illustration of a nephron. Be sure to watch the video in your Connect assignments on the microscopic anatomy of the kidney. It will go over the nephron for you. This is a histology slide of the kidney. This structure here is the parietal layer of the Bowman's capsule or glomerular capsule. Housed inside the Bowman's capsule is a capillary bed, a tuft of capillaries called the glomerulus. The space in between the glomerulus and the parietal layer of the Bowman's capsule is called the capsular space. The renal corpuscle is going to consist of the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. This is looking at a podocyte. The podocytes make up part of the filtration membrane at the kidneys. In the nephron, and we'll talk about the nephron, the functional unit of the kidney, in another video. The podocyte cell body, primary processes, and the secondary processes. The secondary processes produce the filtration slits. This is looking at a ureter. In the ureter, you'll need to be able to identify the mucosa, which consists of transitional epithelium. Recall that the only place you're going to find transitional epithelium is in the urinary system. Deep to the transitional epithelium, here's the lumen. As we're moving away from the lumen, will be the lamina propria. So all of this is lamina propria. Remember, that is loose connective tissue. Moving outward, the next layer will be smooth muscle, and that is called the muscularis. And then surrounding that, you will have an adventitia. The ureter is retroperitoneal. This is looking at the transitional epithelium. Notice that it's stratified. You'll be able to identify this from stratified squamous epithelium because all of the nuclei, and that's what these are going to be round, even up at the apical surface. These cells will look cuboidal or columnar. So this is my transitional epithelium. Again, this is the ureter. We're going to be using models to study the blood vessels in the kidney. So we're going to start with the arteries. We'll begin with the renal artery, which feeds the kidney. Remember that it's going to enter the kidney at the hilum, which is a concave area. The renal artery will then feed into segmental arteries, and the segmental arteries will then feed into interlobar arteries. Let me get rid of the highlight so you can see it. So this is an interlobar artery. Notice that that artery is going through the renal column, which is this space here. This is a renal pyramid, and this is a renal pyramid. So the interlobar arteries and veins are going to be located in the renal columns. A lobe is a pyramid with the cortex associated with it. So this is actually between two lobes. That's where it gets its name. From the interlobar, you will go to the arcuate artery. And the way that you can remember this is that it will form an arc around the base of the pyramid. And then we're going to have the cortical radiate arteries. And what I want you to think of here is they are radiating into the cortex. Remember, this is the cortex here. And the cortical radiate then will empty into afferent arterioles. And the afferent arterioles are going to be these right here coming off of the cortical radiate. So you can see one there, you can see one there. So these are going to be all afferent. They're going to lead to a glomerulus, which is going to be located inside these structures. And these structures are your Bowman's capsules. You can actually see a glomerulus there and one there where the Bowman's capsule has been cut, allowing you to see inside of it. So we're going to have the glomerulus, and then draining the glomerulus, you will have an afferent arteriole. So if this is the afferent coming off of the cortical radiate artery, the afferent arteriole, this one right in here is the afferent. It's carrying blood to paratubular capillaries, which are going to surround the convoluted tubules. Here are paratubular capillaries as well. The efferent arteriole can also lead into a type of capillary called the vasa recta. And what I want you to notice here, notice how the blood is going down and then up. The blood is flowing in the same direction as the filtrate, which is the fluid in the tubule here, is flowing. So the filtrate is moving down and then up, and the vasa recta follows the same direction. So these are the paratubular, and then these are the vasa recta. The vasa recta also come off of the efferent arteriole, and both the vasa recta and the paratubular capillaries are going to empty into those cortical radiate veins. The cortical radiate veins then will flow into arcuate veins, which again go along the base of the pyramids. And the arcuate veins then will go into interlobar veins that go through those renal columns. And again, they're carrying blood out of the kidney, so the blood is flowing in the opposite direction as the arteries, but for the most part, the arteries and veins run parallel to one another. There are no segmental veins, so you go directly into the renal vein and out of the kidneys. The nephron is going to be the functional unit of the kidney. These are microscopic, but this is going to be your nephron. This is going to be the glomerular or Bowman's capsule, which is the first part of a renal tubule, and then that will drain into this squiggly part, which is proximal convoluted tubule, into a descending loop of Henle, an ascending loop of Henle, into a distal convoluted tubule. Notice how it goes underneath the proximal here. This is the distal convoluted tubule. Notice how close it is here to the Bowman's capsule. So it's going to go like this, and then empty into this structure here, which is going to be your collecting duct. And the collecting duct is going to receive urine from multiple nephrons. Once the fluid is in the collecting duct, we will call it urine. While it's in the tubules, the small tubes of the nephron, it will be called filtrate, because it's plasma that has been filtered from the glomerulus. This just illustrates the hilum. Remember, the hilum is going to be that concave region here of the kidney where the tubes are either entering or leaving. So you can see here would be the renal artery, renal vein, and this is the renal pelvis going into the ureter.